But it was interesting what I wanted in that time, and I didn't realize it until my sister came down. I wanted somebody to see me. So a lot of times you go through life and you're doing your thing, right? Success, but nobody really sees you.
Okay.
And so my sister came down, and I thought she was going to be so impressed with my life, right? I wanted her to be impressed. I wanted her to be proud as an older sister. And my sister Ruth, such an angel, she spent a little time with me, and she said, you know, Josh, I see that you're hurting. I see that you're broken. And man, I'm going to tell you something, Tomas. No one had spoken truth to me like that in years. And I'll never forget that conversation. And then she started talking to me about God's grace and how nothing that I would ever do, nothing that I had done in the past, how I had messed up my life, how I felt I had just messed everything up, right, could change God's love for me.
Dude, I've been looking forward to this all week.
Oh,
all right.
Me too, man. Me too,
Here we
man.
go. Tomas Martinez. We are here with TM3 Impact, our podcast this week. And listen, Josh, I am so glad you are here. I am so glad you're here. And we're going to jump right into Josh Lopez here in a minute. But first, our sponsors. You know, I got to really give a lot of credit to Luxury Home Magazine, right? Being an awesome sponsor, and Spanish Grove Academy. You've got a great connection to Spanish Grove.
Yes, our kids.
Your kids went to Spanish Grove?
Yeah, they started dual language at Spanish Grove.
That's right.
Yeah, we absolutely love that place, and just the teachers, just an amazing, amazing place for them to start their education.
Yeah, so we're glad to have those sponsors. And so Josh Lopez here, he is the owner of San Antonio Shades. He is an Iron Man. We'll get into that. He is a newly book author. His book just came out. We're going to get into that. But Josh, here's how I want to start. This is how I start every guest. Is tell me your San Antonio story. How did you come to live in this amazing city? Cliff Note version. That's tough.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Tomas Martinez. I admire you, man. You have such a great voice in San Antonio, and just the things that you're doing are amazing. My San Antonio story. So, I'm from all over. Born in Puerto Rico, Boricua. My mother is Mexican. My dad is Puerto Rican. Grew up in South Bronx, and we ended up in Texas.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, man. So I lived in Austin the majority of my time, went back to Puerto Rico, came back to Texas. But what brought me to San Antonio was my beautiful wife, Martha. Met her. I was singing at a church here on the south side, and met her that morning. We had some friends that were playing Cupid, and they were like, "Man, you got to meet this girl." And man, if you saw my wife, you'd just say, "Man, there is a Lord that does miracles." Because I'm married way up.
Yeah,
man.
You outkicked your coverage. I hear it.
Yeah, man. So met her. And the first 2 years of our marriage, we lived in Austin, and then we just decided to move here to San Antonio. She became a partner at Merrill Lynch with her aunt, and we've been here ever since and love it. Love San Antonio, man. Love the Spurs. This is home, man.
Yeah. And if you know Josh Lopez, Josh talks about tacos. About every other post is about tacos. So you're in the right place.
Yes.
You can't be in Austin talking about tacos.
I kind of felt a little out of place, man. The tacos, man. You can have a bad day, you can have a good day, but the tacos are life, man.
It's life. That's right. That's what it's all about. Well, listen,
that's what the book's about, man.
That's what the book is about, right? Well, so here's the thing. So I'm glad you told me your San Antonio story, but I want to go back to a piece because, again, you wrote this amazing book, Don't Give Up. And I have to tell you, I'm going to just say, listen, if you don't read this book, you're not a friend of Tomas Martinez. Get the book. We'll have information for you to order the book. It's Don't Give Up.
.online.
Don't give up .online. I've read a lot of books and about people's story. And the one thing that really hit me, Josh, is just how real and raw you are with your story. And I really appreciated that.
Oh man, thank you.
I really appreciated that. It as I was reading it, you start the book with Psalms 139.
Yeah.
Right?
One of my favorite songs.
So I'm curious, like, as you were starting this book, what really motivated you to start it with that scripture?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that scripture for me has always been sort of the story that God talks about, that He's written for our life, right? And so if you imagine, God the Father as an author, He has written a story for each of us. And, just that inspiration of Him creating that story and penning that inspiration inspired me to start writing, the story that he's been writing for me, or He's written for me, right? And, what really inspired everything at the beginning, I talked to you a little bit about this, was my dad passed away about 3 years ago. And having, a father pass away, just someone close, everything turns into gold. So I remember my siblings and I, we were looking for everything after he passed. And, we didn't have a relationship growing up, so everything turned into gold. I wanted to know more about his life. And I decided that, I wanted to leave something for my kids. I don't have any plans in passing away soon.
Right, good.
But when that time comes, as it does for all of us, I want to leave something for them. So that's how this journey started.
And so when did you officially start writing?
Yeah, it's right after my dad passed.
Really?
Yeah.
So you hadn't thought about it before then?
I thought about it, but I always, just said, no, I'm not a good speaker, just doubt yourself. And, I do music all day, but when it comes to speaking, I feel like so many other people like yourself are gifted at it. So I have to work a little bit harder at it. So writing was a little intimidating for me.
Yeah. So you start writing, and as you start the book off, I thought it was really interesting. You're on a cruise.
Yeah.
Right? And so anybody that knows my wife and I, we are like cruise junkies. Like right now we're kind of like, shaking right now because we would normally be on a cruise at this time, right?
Right.
And so, you started it off with that scripture, and then you start talking about this amazing cruise that you were on, and just this culmination of what had happened in your life.
Right.
But that cruise was basically kind of like it's just a frosting on everything that had happened on your life. Yeah. And so I'm curious, you start with that, but why did you start the chapter with that story?
Yeah. So being on that cruise, I remember there was a lot of time to think about, just the last 3 years after my dad had passed, and just all the amazing blessings. Our business, we're just doing the best ever, and just God's really, really blessed it. Our family, most importantly, is healthy, and just we've seen so many amazing things in the last 3 years. And I was riding solo on that cruise, had my band with me, but I just had a lot of time to think. And when you have kiddos, man, it's hard to break away sometimes and just have that time to think. And so that's where it started. But man, I love the water. And you see a lot of metaphors in the book with water. I'm in front of an ocean, and it always resets me. And I talk about in the first chapters of the book how there's so many parallels to life and the ocean. You look out at the ocean, it's beautiful. Life can be that way sometimes, but there's some times where it's rough and there's unknowns, and you're in the middle of something that you don't know which direction to go, and you feel lost. And if you don't know how to swim, you sink.
Yes.
So there's so many parallels. I always love the water. I love using metaphors with the water, in the book. And that's how it started, man.
That's cool. Now the book, for those of you because you're going to read it, you have this quote, "That to me was truly living out my dreams, being awake in my dreams."
Yeah.
This idea of being awake in your dreams.
Yeah.
Talk to that.
Yeah. So you have to understand that I went through a period years before, and I talk about this first chapter of the book. Yeah. I was a homeless kid. I watched my dad being a Vietnam veteran battle with post-traumatic stress disorder and with drug addiction. I walked in, and he was shooting up heroin. So that happened at a very early age. And so a lot of my dreams and that aspiration and belief that I could do anything in life was just shattered and completely devastating, at a very, very young age. At 15 years old, I was on the streets of Austin, Texas, homeless, dropped out of school. And you can just imagine, I don't have to go into all the details of that, but you can just imagine the mess of a life I had in that time. Yeah. And so fast forward, get a call from my aunt, and she says, or it's actually my older sister, and she's talking to me now, and she says, "Hey, our aunt wants to take you in Puerto Rico and help you get back in school." And so that was a lifeline to me in that time. And I was able to go back to school and graduate college 2 years and graduate valedictorian of my class. Again, God's grace.
Yeah.
And then the last year of college, I landed a record deal. And that was kind of cheesy how that happened. They have this thing called Mr. Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And at the time, I loved tacos during that time, but I had a higher metabolism, man. So I doubt anybody would ask me to do that now. But, it was one of those things where, I looked at it as, man, this is going to help me get ahead. And it was during a talent show doing that contest. The producer out in the audience said, "Hey, we want you to audition for this."
But you won the competition. Did you win it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
You left that part out.
Yeah,
you won
I won. And then I did an audition for this pop group, and had no idea that this producer had been a producer for Menudo. Yeah. If you're Latino, or if you listen to Spanish music, those groups back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
I'm telling my age too.
Yep.
So our group was Jaque Mate. It was a combination of girls and guys, and
it
was cheesy, man.
I bet.
Yeah. So, but during that time, it was huge because I'd gone from being homeless, broken, to now graduating college. I had a place off the beach. And so now dreams, going back to your question, they seemed a little bit more attainable, right?
Yeah.
But interestingly, I was still empty in that place.
Yes, you did. You mentioned that in the book. I was going to ask about that because you go from this kid that was home. And how long were you homeless for?
So there were 2 times I was homeless. Yep. Our family was homeless for close to 2 years.
Okay.
And
what age were you at that time?
So I was 12, 13.
Okay.
Then, from 15 to 16 was my homeless time, and it was a little under a year, so we had, it was, a big chunk of our adolescent years.
Those are formative. Those are formative exactly times, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a formative time to be at that point. And so now when I hear that quote, that to me was truly living out my dreams, being awake in my dreams. So now you go to Puerto Rico, you become this pop star, and money was not, at that point, I would imagine you were making pretty good money. Yeah.
A lot of it is a facade, right? Because you're surrounded by people that tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
You start believing something about yourself. A lot of it that is not true, right? You're around people that think you're so great because of your talent, and who don't really know you. But it was interesting what I wanted in that time, and I didn't realize it until my sister came down. I wanted somebody to see me. So a lot of times you go through life and you're doing your thing, right? Success, but nobody really sees you.
Okay.
And so my sister came down, and I thought she was going to be so impressed with my life, right? I wanted her to be impressed. I wanted her to be proud as an older sister. And my sister Ruth, such an angel, she spent a little time with me, and she said, Josh, I see that you're hurting. I see that you're broken. And man, I'm going to tell you something, Tomas. No one had spoken truth to me like that in years. And I'll never forget that conversation. And then she started talking to me about God's grace and how nothing that I would ever do, nothing that I had done in the past, how I had messed up my life, how I felt I had just messed everything up, right, could change God's love for me. And that was a message that I clearly needed to hear in that time. But also, it was a whole different perspective of who God was. It wasn't about trying to do all these right things to attain his love. but it was more so about what he had already done for me and what I needed to receive and how I needed to love myself and love others, right? So, you know, in a short time after that conversation, this was a really turning point of my life. I surrendered my life and purpose and plan to Christ. And I said, God, you know, just take my life. I don't want to live without purpose anymore, because I had done that quite a bit. And it was very, very young. You know, when you go through hardship at a very young age, you grow up really, really quick. Yeah. So I found most of my friends, most of the conversations I had with people were about 5, 6, 7 years older. You can probably attest to that. Because you couldn't really relate with anybody, you know, your same age, because they hadn't gone through the stuff you had gone through, you know? And so that's when I moved back to Texas.
And Austin? Did you go specifically to Austin?
Yeah, okay. So most of my family my mother lived in Austin at the time, and my sisters. And, you know, I was at a crossroad because we were getting ready to do another record deal, an extension of the record deal with Sony, and I decided to not do it. And it was more important for me to be happy and be at peace. And that meant for me in that time, I needed to find purpose. I needed to be close to my family. Okay. You know, there were years and years of me not just
being separated.
And so, you know, family's everything, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I can imagine going back to, you leave Austin homeless, go to Puerto Rico, get a degree, win Mr. Puerto Rico, or a pop star. Did y'all travel outside of Puerto Rico at that time?
We did. We went to Venezuela. You know, this is an interesting story. We opened up at one time for Ricky Martin.
Oh my gosh.
Mana. You remember Mana?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So they were just started. So Ricky was... he was on General Hospital at the time, and Mana was just starting. They were still at a college in Arecibo. So we did a concert with them on the beach. Had no idea that they were going to be so huge. Yeah. And, you know, it was a cool time for us. But once again, it was a facade. Yeah. Because, you know, most of those guys that were in the group, you know, they just, after they found out the reality of what that was, right? It's, you know, they've gone on to be business owners, or, you know, just different things in life. It was an important lesson to learn at a very, very early time in my life, you know?
So I'm sitting here imagining, you know, again, going from being homeless, and then you go to Puerto Rico and you have this level of fame. You come back to Austin, you still get an opportunity for a record deal. Yeah. And you just say, you know what, I'm gonna turn this down. Did you already have a plan of what you were gonna do with your life, or were you was that a moment where you were just kind of like, let me just see where God takes me at this point? Yeah. Was it just?
Yeah. So, you know, one thing you have to know, at that time, I knew how to hustle. Okay. I knew how to, you know, I'd been homeless, been on the street. You know, when I moved to Puerto Rico through college, I worked 3 jobs. So it was never a question coming back to Texas, oh man, will it work? Because I knew I just have to get a good job, work my butt off, and, you know, just be close to my family. But the most important thing was happiness and peace. I chose that over, you know, hey, I'm going to do this pop star thing.
Right. You know, but I also too, I thought it was interesting in the book, you had never really sang in front of people. Before did you sing? You didn't sing a lot in front of people before the contest in Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah. So one detail about that, my mom raised us in church, and in fact, she's been the rock of our family. And so early on, you know, even when my dad was going in and out of his battles and you know, the post-traumatic stress disorder, she always took us to church. So she taught us music. She taught us, you know, how to treat a business owner and the custodian the same way, you know, just taught us people skills that to this day, you know, I really, really appreciate her meekness and just her steadiness and consistency. Because, you know, if you meet my mom, man, she's just so consistent, man. She's been that way for years. And all that to say is that, you know, it was something, a part of the happiness coming back, being close to my mom and being close to my siblings. I knew that it was it was going to be the next chapter of my life.
Yeah. And so at that point, you started singing at church. You started connecting with a ministry where you were singing for not the youth group, but you were just getting connected, right?
Yeah. So the dynamic changed, right? So I had tasted a little bit of what it was to have a career in a short time where it revolved around me.
Yeah.
And I found that at the end of that to be so just, purposeless. And so I actually prayed. I said, God, the next time that I do music, I wanted to just have some type of purpose. I knew what it was like as a kid to sing in church and see someone moved. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing that can take that away, right?
Yep.
When you do something and it puts a smile on somebody's face, or when you do something and impacts somebody in a certain way, there's just something to be said for that. We all long to do that.
Yep.
And so I was playing the piano in that church, Shoreline in Austin, Texas.
Yep.
And the worship pastor walked in and said, "Hey, do you want to, perhaps lead for our youth?" And so I volunteered 7 years leading worship for the young people there at Shoreline.
Wow.
And that was a whole new thing, man. I was just, thrown into the water, man.
Yeah.
And talk about, sink or swim, man.
But that's where you probably honed all your talent. That's the 10,000 hours.
That's exactly right. And to the point where I knew that it was my purpose in life. So I went to, this is a funny story. So I went to the executive pastor and I said, his name was DR. I said, DR, I believe with all my heart that I need to be on staff. And I'm working at a bank now. I'm volunteering hours here. In fact, I was volunteering over 20 hours a week at that church. And I said, I'll start at the bottom. I'll be a custodian, whatever it takes, because I believe that I should be here. And he told me something that was interesting. He said, and this is, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about this. He said, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when. It's all about timing. And that helped me embrace, that was perhaps the first don't give up story for me, because whenever you know your purpose, and when you know without a shadow of a doubt, I should be doing this, but everything around you points to, they're not seeing that same value. You're not really making a living doing it, or you're, in this place where it requires a lot of time that you feel like you're just giving away, right?
Yeah.
You get to a point maybe where you start questioning and saying, "Oh, is this really my purpose?"
Yeah.
And it was a reminder for me that, that didn't matter, if I was getting paid for it or not, and to this day, it doesn't matter. It's one of those things where when it's your purpose, you do it regardless.
Yeah.
And you know that, and you do it with all your heart. And that's what really brings that fulfillment, right?
And then the blessings are like tenfold. I can imagine all that time singing and preparing yourself prepared you for that next level of where you were going to go in the music ministry.
Yeah, absolutely.
It got it got you prepared. This is one quote that I thought was really interesting. There's two here that I want to hit on. You said, and going back to your time being homeless, you said bad circles plus bad choices equals a bad life.
Yeah.
And good circles and good choices equals a good life.
Yeah.
Like just talk for a little bit about that when going back to that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes back to, for me, in every stage of my life, what I surrounded myself with. So the first thing you think of is relationships. So those relationships, you choose relationships, right? You choose what you surround yourself with. So if you surround yourself, in a simple way with negative relationships, relationships that are not challenging you or not pushing you. I admire you and I appreciate your friendship so much. Every time I get around you, I feel challenged. I feel like, man, I got to step it up because Tomas, man, is doing big things, So that's the kind of people that you need in your life. When you don't have that, there's definitely something missing. When you have people around you that hurt you constantly, when you have people around you that talk down to you constantly, you need to make a choice, an intentional, just shift in your life to say, I'm going to surround myself with people that encouraged me
Yeah.
to fulfill my purpose. And I didn't find that out until later in life. I found, even being homeless, I was surrounding myself with the bad, influence. And there was a time even in college where I did that. And even being in that whole pop music world, I was still doing that. And it wasn't until I said, man, I need to be better in relationships, not only surround myself with these friendships that challenge and encourage me, but be that friend to others.
That's big.
Yeah.
That's big. But those relationships help you make better choices.
That's exactly right.
Right. So I would imagine you leave Puerto Rico, you come to Austin, you start a friendship group of people that started helping you make better choices and making better, a better way of life.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then also, so when it comes to music, people always laugh. I'm the weakest musician ever when I'm on stage with my friends playing music. And I've purposely always chosen that because I'm always learning. And I'm not intimidated in the least bit and I'm surrounded by a bunch of, musicians that are much greater because I want to learn.
Right.
And that's been a blessing for me for years. There's good friends of mine, Jason Meekins, Aaron Kiefer, that I've played with for years. And they are just so incredible musicians. And, playing with them, it helps you step up. It helps you and encourages you and challenges you to step up to this level. Yeah. And it's true with business. It's true with, most importantly, family.
Yeah.
And, to find, as a husband, as a father, to find and surround myself with people that I admire that are killing it in that world, where they're, amazing fathers, amazing husbands, and amazing leaders in the business world. Yeah. And I've been blessed to have those friendships, and there's something to be said for being intentional with those relationships, right?
Yeah, for sure. You got to look for them.
Yeah.
You definitely got to look for them. Just in the same way you have to be intentional with your choices, right?
That's exactly
now, right. Your business, right? So I want to get to the point where you start this business at San Antonio Shades. You are in California, if I remember correctly, or somewhere, right? West Coast. So, and these guys are musicians, but they have this little side hustle, right? And they're doing blinds or something. And you're like, hey, could you show me how to do that? Yeah. Talk about that story. I thought that was really cool.
Well, one very important detail with that story, and I mention it in the book, when you're doing what you're passionate about or your purpose, opportunities will happen.
So
and
true.
You never know what doors it's going to lead you to, right? And so I had just been laid off from a tech company in Austin. So I was doing computer training for government offices in Austin, Texas. It was a really, really good job. I just proposed to Martha. And so, after buying that ring, man, you're just like, all right, man, I better be sure I have a good job, And so I had things kind of just all my ducks in a row. And then we get a call in from our supervisor at the time. The 7 of us doing the same thing. They said, hey, we lost the contract with the state, and we have to let you guys.
This story was not in the book.
Yeah. I
that story
forgot that. Man.
But I mean, hey, it happens. But keep going. So you lose your job.
So I lose my job, and then one of the last emails that I get on my work computer was a producer. His name is Phil Cias. He's written, the Chia Chia jingle, clap on, clap off. Amazing.
Oh, wow.
Amazing producer. Yeah. And it was the first time anybody had called me, heard my song, and said, hey, we want to record your song. Okay. And so he said, hey, do you have time? I can fly you out to California. I said,
well,
by the way, I do. I just had an open schedule just recently. So
right.
I can do that. So we get down to California, Redland, California. And I meet these guys, GB5. It's a group of 5 brothers, amazing, talented, gifted. And as we're recording the song, a song called Just to Know You.
Okay.
each brother's coming in and they're like, man, we're doing so good. And, they just seemed like they were prospering, man. And I prayed to God to have a tent making because I knew that music early on wasn't going to pay the bills, man. Yeah. There's very few that can do that. And so I wanted something non-related to music, and I'd always wanted to have my own business. So I saw this as a possible business. And I said, hey, Louis, the oldest brother, I said, hey, if I stay here the next 2 weeks, I'll work for free. Teach me the business. And he was so generous and kind. He said, man, absolutely. I think they needed an extra worker.
Yeah, they did. Perfect timing.
So he taught me everything he knew about the business. Yeah. And I came back to Austin. It was 2003.
Okay.
And I learned so much in the next 2 years starting my business, just hard knocks. I didn't know, anything about, being a business owner. I went to the school of hard knocks.
Of course. So, but this is critical because I think there are a lot of people, Josh, that I talk to that always ask, like, hey, I want to start this business, or I've got this idea, and they get really excited because they're having this mental image of just, it's going to be amazing. Yeah. It's going to be perfect. Right. They get this kind of like this, visionary fantasy of starting a business. Right. So I would imagine just the thought, and this is the thing, you were willing to be trained for 2 weeks without pay so that you can learn something completely new and take it back to where you live to do it. Number one, right? That's complete eagerness. Usually somebody that's willing to do that is probably going to be successful, right? One thing. Number two, you come back. Are you married at this time? Had you already gotten married, or did you wait?
So a year after starting business, that's when married.
You got married. Okay.
Yeah.
So that first year you're in the business.
Early years of marriage.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Now that's hard.
Yeah, it was hard. And so Martha just told me a story, and this was powerful. She said, because she used to go with me sometimes just handing out I had a little Toyota Tacoma truck. Yeah. And so I'd go to subdivisions sometimes and just see, new homes, and then pass out like these little posters. We were called Best Price Blinds. Yeah. And that's how we generated our business. But I had a pastor friend of mine, his name is Randy Phillips, and he had so much to do with, in fact, I started working with him for his church that he just started in Austin at the time. Okay. So it was more of a supplemental at the time. And one Sunday morning, he said, hey, he has a country accent. He doesn't mind me talking, trying to imitate him. But, he's like, Josh, this young man right here just started a blind business. If you need any blinds, Josh is the man. That's funny. He's the blind man and singing. And so, bro, after that plug, man, all these, just clients started coming, and we started doing, huge projects, and, it was a trickle effect. Yep. But it wasn't, it's interesting. It wasn't until the last 4 years that it was really a shift for us, because we started focusing on just a niche market. We do automated shades, and, that's, what we do now. And we've been so blessed to work with builders in town, to work in, 3 cities now, and, have an amazing team, and, God's blessed it so much. But there were definitely those years of grit and pain and, is this really going to work?
Yeah. I think back to when I started my business, right? Again, you have that fantasy, right? You have that idea. What do you think was in those early years, what was it that kept you truly focused and not giving up? Because look, it's Don't Give Up. That's the title of your book, which everybody's going to get. What kept you from not giving up in those tough times? Because, 2008, 9, and 10 happened, right? Yeah. That weird period in our economy where things just kind of hit the brakes a little bit.
Yes. And we went through our, after the recession, that was huge for us, because Lowe's and Home Depot started offering the same thing. And, we lost a lot of business after that time. But I'll say 3 things to that. The first is relationships. So my wife has always been that person in my corner, just saying, Josh, you got this. Don't give up. Hey, it's going to be okay. No matter what we've gone through, she's been just an amazing force in that, where she's also challenged me, when I've had moments, and we all have these moments, where we kind of feel sorry for ourselves or whatever.
What was me?
Yeah.
So hard.
And she's like, hey, there's no time for that. You're better than this. Like, pick up, like, it's time to move. And that's my Salvadorian queen, man. She's
awesome.
She's amazing. And then the second thing, is really, we've always been advocates of writing down like our goals and looking at them, and it sort of holds you accountable. And so we had, we always do 5-year plans, and make sure that we're keeping each other accountable. And then I even have that with some of my friends. My friends will ask me about them, so I think there was a lot of that. So once again, those relationships, that accountability.
Yeah.
And then the last, which is really the biggest, is God's grace, man. He has always been so faithful. And when I've been in points in my life where I wanted to give up, it was always something, whether it was a person, whether it was a challenge, right? Because sometimes challenges that come your way can completely take your mind off of what you are focusing on. Yep. And then all of a sudden you see this new purpose and new plan. And so that's happened quite a bit in my life. Man.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the piece, I think, for anybody out there that you want to start a business, if you who you marry matters.
Yeah.
I say this all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like who you marry matters.
Absolutely. No doubt.
And if you don't get that part right, you may have a really hard time getting a business right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
have to be a team.
You got to be a team.
You have to be a team. And team doesn't mean, a lot of people mistake it with we have to, because Martha, so we're in the business together, but, she's been fortunate enough to be, just successful with what she does. She was a VP of a small firm. She worked in the financial industry for 15 years, and now she's a stay-at-home mom, which she loves and she's so great at. And it's the biggest job she's ever done. People ask her, "What do you do now?" And I'm quick to say, man, she works hard, because there's no doubt, that stay-at-home parents work really, really hard. But all that to say is that being a team, I think, goes back to encouraging each other, man, to accomplish your purpose and your dreams. And they're the ones that when you feel like giving up, will say, "Don't do it," and keep on going, and you got this. And it's very important to have that in life, man.
You gotta have it. Yeah. I agree. Now there's a point, you in the book you talk about how you and your father, kind of reconciled, right? Because there was a really long period of a lot of anger, right? And I think I would imagine there are people who could relate to that, just having just this hurt, that they've dealt with for a long time. Yep. And at one point, I remember he said this to you, and I just want you to talk about it if you don't mind, right? He said, "Son, live fearlessly, be courageous, always forgive, and above all, love with all your heart. Don't give up, son. Don't ever give up." Yeah,
man, it's such a powerful moment for us, for my dad and I, because you got to understand the majority of our life, we didn't have a relationship. And so it wasn't until the end I get a call. I'd always talk to him, and I felt like I was being the parent sometimes, with our conversations. And then finally, he took me up on what I had always said. "Hey, Dad, move down to Texas, live the rest of your life with your grandkids and with your children. We love you." And so he just had just a bunch of guilt and shame for his past, and it was hard for him. And then the post-traumatic stress disorder, I don't really think that he got the treatment that he needed for that. And so, long story short, man, he had pulmonary fibrosis, and we had no idea that we had 2 months with him. And
when he moved,
so I picked him up, and he was just, barely breathing. And I said, "Dad, I got to take you to the VA hospital." And so I took him, and we took him to 3 hospitals. And by the 3rd hospital, the doctor there diagnosed him with what was pulmonary fibrosis. And he came in, and he was just honest and open. It was difficult for us to hear, but he said, "You've got about 2-3 months tops." And we were devastated. So I spent almost every single day with him in the hospital. And then my younger sister, Deborah, she said, for hospice, I want him to come to my house. And so the night before he passed, this is such a beautiful picture, man. He had all his grandchildren in the room. He had all his children in the room, and we sang hymns. One of his best friends that had been one of those friends throughout his life walked in and played a trumpet for him, and this hymn on the trumpet. It was beautiful, man. But then the day of, I felt like, man, this was the day he was going to pass. And the hospice nurse walked over and she said, hey, he's still holding on. He's still hanging on to something. Does something need to be said? And I knew immediately that my mom had told us that she had forgiven him, but she had never spoken those words to him. And so I go to the other room and I said, Mom, would you do me a favor? Would you just whisper to Dad? At this point, he was non-responsive. We knew it was a matter of time. And she walked in there and she said, she called him Cholo. She said, Cholo, I forgive you. I have forgiven you years ago. You're going to be at peace. And you could tell, she was getting emotional saying it. And I held his hand, and about, kid you not, 2 minutes after that, he passed away. And that powerful statement of forgiving was actually something that he had finally experienced at the end of his life. And so I felt like those words, live fearlessly, be courageous, always forgive, was saying, son, I've lived the opposite of this. So if you want to do something in life, definitely get these right. Live with no accounts. And if you have anything against anybody, just be clear of it in your heart. And I would say, going back to dreams, a lot of us do kind of cheat ourselves when we're holding on to stuff like that. It's important to let go of things and let go of our past and forgive people, to just have that clarity and that focus. And so, but that was powerful, man. And we just recently, a cousin of mine, with one of the bullets that he had from being a veteran, he carved that on there for me. And that quote.
Wow.
And it's something that we passed around with the family. My little sister made a portrait of it, and it's just one of the things, siblings in our family, we've kind of just taken under, and just said, hey, we need to live this way.
What was that in the last 3 years that he said that to you? Was it
was
during
right before,
that time in
it
hospice?
was right before he passed. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Right before he passed. And it was, so he had gone under, we thought that he was gone one time. He went through, he was in almost a coma, and, so he came back, and that's the first thing that he said. And he actually started writing it first. So he could barely scribble. And so he kept on trying to write, forgive. And I thought that he was talking to me at first and just saying, forgive me and, all that. But it was more so like, no, son, you need to forgive yourself, forgive others.
Yeah.
You need to live this way, because I've lived the opposite of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when I go back to that quote and I see, he says, live fearlessly.
Yeah.
I see that you're doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Trying my best, man. It's
this book is a testament of it.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Right.
But with that, I will say fear is present when you're doing things, right?
Yeah.
It's never, it's never this thing that just goes away and you're just like, oh man, it's great. Like, we do things constantly to this day that scare us. And it's being able to face those things and say, you know what, regardless of that scare or that fear, I'm still going to do this.
Yeah.
And when you push past that, man, there is something beautiful on the other side of that. But yeah, so, to answer your question, and I scare myself all the time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's good. And that's where the being courageous is, right? That's where, that part about being courageous, but not giving up.
Yeah.
And then, so I'm going to fast forward in the book to the part where that obviously you and I have kind of talked a lot about is the Ironman experience, right?
Yeah.
And you're an Ironman. You did Ironman.
The last one was 2014. So I did a half in Austin, and the last one was Coeur d'Alene.
Coeur d'Alene, which is Coeur d'Alene, like the one they canceled. Like they don't even do anymore. Is that what they said?
So
do they not do it?
So one detail about that, I told all my friends, 2 years prior, because I trained for about a year. But even the friends the triathlete friends that were like, maybe you should do Arizona or Texas, you know, because it's flat. So, but don't do Coeur d'Alene.
Right.
It's beautiful out there, but the elevation is so high. And
why in the world did you pick Coeur d'Alene?
It was
it just a timing deal?
It was probably like, more of this,
did you know how hard it was?
I didn't.
Okay. See, okay. All right.
But I knew it was tougher than Arizona and Texas. And I think some of the reasons were, at the time of year, I wanted to have versus having a hot race. I wanted to have I choose cold, I kind of, being from New York. But it was, along the process, man, I doubted myself a lot, man. I was like, why did I choose Coeur d'Alene, man?
So my buddy did Whistler, and we
really?
we did our podcast with him, and he told us about the elevation gain in Whistler, and it's just insane, right? It's just crazy. So I want you to talk about because you talk about the story in the water, and it got choppy that day. Talk about that. Because for those of you who don't know, an Ironman is 2.4 miles swim.
2.4 mile swim.
112?
112 bike. And then the marathon.
Just a marathon at the end. No biggie. No biggie. So talk about the water experience.
So, the detail with that is that of the three, swimming was the hardest for me. So when I started training for swimming, I felt like, man, I do not know how to do this thing. And it's all about relaxing, becoming buoyant, moving with the water. In fact, someone told me this is funny. They said, hey man, when are you the best in the water? It's like when you're not doing anything, when you're, pretty much, you just float, right? It says your body was meant to be buoyant with the water. So it's all about relaxing and not fighting. And so, to the day, before the race, I was still, with that swim thing. I mean, I had already swam the 2.4 miles, and I did a half Ironman race prior to that, and I had built up confidence. But open water swimming was just dreadful to me. And talk about fear. I mean, that was present and tangible that morning. And where we stayed at, the owner of the bed and breakfast where my wife and I stayed, a storm came through. And I was praying, man. I was, when you do your Ironman, you're gonna pray, man. It's I was praying the night. I was like, man, I could have like all this happen, with Ironman race, but like just let the water be smooth.
I need to smooth, God.
Just let me finish the water race, right? And so,
then you can rain.
Right. I mean, because everything's downhill after that.
Is Coeur d'Alene is it a lake?
Yeah.
It's a lake,
okay. It's a beautiful aquifer. One of the cleanest, but it's 2 days before a storm came through. And so the owner of that bed and breakfast said, hey, the water's going to be choppy because it takes about 2 days. He said, and then he said to give me encouragement, he said, I didn't finish when I did it just because the water was too choppy. So I'm going in. So it was a wave start. So you're talking about thousands of athletes moving into the water slowly. Yeah. And as they're getting in, I see far off, there's kayakers helping sight for the swim, just all the swimmers in because we can barely see the buoys. And they're pulling people out because people are giving up on the first 800. You swim 800 meters out, 200 meters, to the side, and then 800 meters in and run and do a loop. Get back on it. So just going in, man, I see people being pulled out. So your mind just starts doing things, you just start like second guessing and just, man, I had just so much fear. And I remember getting into the water and the first few seconds, man, like I felt just this heat come over my body and I was like, man, I'm not going to make it. This is not going to happen. And I decided to push through that Still I was praying. I think I was praying for like a straight 24 hours.
Yeah.
The race.
For real.
And then, my coach gave me some great advice. He said, get on a wake, a good swimmer, get on their wake, for some of it, if you feel yourself like panicking a little bit, because it was a lot of that. And so I pushed through that. It was several seconds. And then I just felt like this courage fill my heart. And things like, my coach telling me you got to trust your training, and you haven't made it this far to give up, and you've worked this hard to finish. And, so I just start hearing my wife saying, Josh, you got this, and all those encouragements that you've heard along the way of training. And I finished. And there's a picture. I don't know if you've seen it. And I think I posted it one time. I get out of the water and my goggles are to the side because somebody hit me like the last 800 meters.
Yeah.
My goggles were like to the side. So I was
swimming blind.
I was swimming blind, bro. Like I had one eye. Like it's such a bad picture. There's no good pictures when you do Ironman, man.
Right.
You're not going to get a cool magazine shot, man.
It's awesome.
Anyway, so and that day I'll never forget. On the bike, so you're climbing, and we had up to 40 mile per hour winds. So climbing, up, what was it, 5,000 elevate. I mean, you're just climbing for a long time with those winds. Like on a carbon bike, you feel like you're going to fall off. And there was a guy that was right next to me the last, I think it was at 90 mile mark on the bike. And he's like, man, we're not going to make it. And I'm like, man, what is it?
Whoa.
What is it with this negativity,
Wow.
And so I turned to him and I said, man, you got this. And he actually helped me because I was taking it, a little slower during that time, but him saying that motivated me to go faster and encourage him. And he actually helped me.
Wow.
And then we were able to finish together.
Did he end up finishing the marathon too?
Yeah, he did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we saw each other at the end, and he was like, man, thank you so much. And I was like, thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Because you probably would have just kept at that pace,
that's
and you may
exactly
have
right.
been cut off.
Yep. There's a time limit you need to, and that's why he was saying that. He's like, we're not going to make it.
Yeah. Wow.
But, crossing that finish line, and there's a video, that my wife took, I was in tears, man. It was spiritual for me because you don't have music during the day. You don't have distractions. It's just you and God. And I was just thinking of all the parallels in life. Sometimes you want to give up. Sometimes it gets hard, and you got to embrace that. And you get to a point where your body is numb. Yeah. And you're just like, you embrace the pain. Yeah. And it's early. It was early on in the race for me. And the last guy that made it through, I think he was in his 60s, man. And there's a cutoff right at 12 a.m. Okay. And Mike Riley, the guy that says, you are an Ironman. Yep. He came out of the stand and he pushed this guy to cross the finish line.
To get him to pass.
And it was that was the most amazing story that day.
Wow.
Just, if you want to do something, you set your mind to it and you do it. It's going to take hard work. But you can do it. You know? Your mind tells you that you can along the way. You can't, but we can do so much more than we tell ourselves we can.
It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah, man.
And so I'm glad I wanted to make sure we brought up the Ironman because because I'm doing my journey right now and kind of figuring out the swimming. I'm figuring out the biking. And during the training, what kind of spiritual parallels did you bring into it from with the training that you had to do? Yeah, so there was an important detail. So I had a swim coach, Linda Miller, and Don. Is she here in San Antonio? Yeah, she's amazing. Okay, Linda Miller. You gotta definitely look her up. She's amazing, and she really helped me with the swim. Don Lasoli, he's a trainer at Lifetime Fitness, and he really helped me with the bike. In fact, my first bike ride was with him in the rain, lightning, and after that I was hooked, man. I was like, man, I want to do this. And so she told me something that was very, very important. She said, the day of the race, you're not going to be able to control so many things. Inclement weather is one thing you cannot control, but you will always be able to control your response to every single thing that happens to that day. So stay positive. The most important thing was stay positive, trust your training, and,
decide that you're going to cross that finish line. I had to decide that, so there was a lot of me telling myself, hey, you're going to cross that finish line today. Yeah. You haven't come this far to give up. And so I think the spiritual parallels with that is that, let's take for now, for instance. Yeah. There are so many things out of our control. We've been just like, what in the world, man? We started, I don't know about you, but I started 2020. Yeah. And my family and I were like, man, this is going to be the best year. Seriously. So many of our friends were like, man, we have all these plans this year. We had all these trips that we were going to take. We just, all these things. And all of a sudden we're interrupted with chaos and just so much that is going on with hatred in our country now and divisiveness. And, all this just disrupts us. And what it's done for us, we ask this question, how are you going to respond to this? Yeah. And so every single day we have that question. How are we going to respond? We
get to choose how we respond.
We get to choose how we're going to respond. And so we can either be a part of the problem or we can be a part of the solution. We can be a part of the discouragement or the encouragement.
I love it.
We have to be a part. If we're going to get past this, man, we need to be a part of the hope and the encouragement. And we're in this together, but we're not in the same boat, because some of us are on yachts and some of us are on little boats, and we're feeling like just the turbulence of the water. The people that are on the front lines right now in the medical world and, restaurant owners, man, they're experiencing this thing in such a different way. Our first responders, I mean, they're experiencing all of this in a different way. And they have been, at the beginning. And so my wife and I, in this time, we've just prayed and just said, God, how can we be a part of that hope for people? And one of the things is the timing of this book. Yeah. Because I was going to release it last year, but, through some different things that happened with the publisher, I felt like, man, I need to wait. Yeah. And there were still some things that needed to be said. When you write a book, man, you're second guessing yourself, and you're like, you go to edit so many times. And then I had an incredible team that really, really looked at, just chapters, and they gave me advice for it. There was an editor out of Switzerland that said, hey, you got to put pictures in it. And, that tells a story. Pictures tell stories. Yeah. And so to answer your question, man, I feel like, God calls us in this time to rise up, man, to be a part of the solution. And each one of us have something to give. Yeah. Being the best versions of ourselves is so important in this
It's
time.
Part of that.
And not being perfect at all, because none of us are perfect. No. We're going to fail, and we're going to have thoughts. We've had days where we're just like, man, this is crazy. My wife is like, they asked her, are you going to take your kids back? And we're, we have those days of like, man, we'll put hazmat suits on them and they'll be good.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
They'll figure it out.
But, we all have something to give in this time. We all have something to give. And whether it's a helping hand in our circle, we can all make a difference.
I think it's interesting you use the analogy of the water again, going back to your cruise. Yeah. Right? Going back to that, you're on the balcony and you're thinking, hey, I'm living in my dream. I'm awake in my dream. Yeah. But you use the analogy of the idea that, we're all in the water, but none of us are in the same boat. That there's some people that have bigger boats that can weather that a little bit better. Absolutely. Some people are in smaller boats. I love that analogy.
Yeah, it's true.
It's so
true. And then
true.
some people are sinking. Some people are out there swimming, man, and so what we can do, instead of like trying to just act like we're on our boat separate from, if we're really all in this together, then if we see somebody sinking, man, it's our job to go out there and help them get back, and
for sure.
If we see somebody's boat going under, it's our job to go out there and help, so it's, I've seen a lot of that in this time. Yeah. We love Community Bible Church here in
CBC.
San Antonio, and Pastor Ed and Phil and all those guys. The incredible things that they've done in this time has just been so beautiful. Yeah. So I think, in these times you see hope rise. You see the best of people, you see the worst of people too, man.
It's unfortunately, right? Yeah. That's part of that. That's part of being in that water, is that sometimes I think, people can be in the bigger boat and looking down like, well, why aren't you prepared? You know, who could prepare for COVID?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's true, man.
In this circumstance that we're in, it's really difficult to ever see anything like this coming. We're gonna wrap up with a couple more questions, but there's a quote that you said. You were talking about God moving mountains, and God moves mountains, right? God can do the impossible. Yeah. And I was reading today when Peter goes in Acts 9, and Peter goes to and he meets Tabitha, who had passed. She was a disciple that had passed in Joppa, and he raises her from the dead.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm listening to that and I'm like, okay. You know, I would say raising someone from the dead is pretty high up there on moving mountains.
It's a miracle.
That's a miracle, right?
Yeah.
But think about this quote. You say, yes, God can move the mountain, but usually he invites us to climb.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was the first quote that I shared from your book.
Yeah.
You know?
Thank you, man.
That hit me, man. Yeah. He invites us to climb. It reminded me of another book that I had read, right? There's another book that I'd read called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Yeah.
Right? Is it the obstacle is the way? Sometimes we do. God is saying, hey, yes, the mountain is there. Now start climbing.
Yeah.
Where did that come to you when you wrote that? Where was that coming from? What place was that coming from?
Yeah, there's so many of those stories, man. There's so many of those stories because in my life, you know, I learned very, very early on that life is tough. Life is like a mountain. And, you know, there have been other times where God has absolutely powerfully removed that mountain and made a way. But most things in my life, I've had to climb that mountain. But in climbing that mountain, I have found his strength. I have found his grace. I have found him coaching me. And I'll share this story with you, man. It's about my oldest son, Joshua. Recently, he did cross country. Okay. And he started, and I remember his first race was excruciating. It was when the sun just started popping out. It was like the 90s, man. He looked at me when he crossed the finish line and he was like, Dad, why are you doing this to me? Like with his face, he was like, do you want to kill me? You know, like, why are you putting this hurt on me? And immediately I had that thought of that book, you know, like, it would have been easy for me to say, hey, Joshua, you don't have to do this. But I knew that he was going to learn something in that pain. He was going to learn something about himself. He ended up improving by the end of the season 7 minutes. He shaved 7 minutes off his time. Wow. He became just an amazing runner. But the first few weeks, man, he was hating it. And he'd come home and he'd be like, man, why are you doing this? And I feel like I learned so much about parallels being a father, you know, with my kids. God speaks to me all the time, you know, with that dynamic, you know, man, being a father. And it's so true with us. You know, sometimes we want God to take something away. But he's teaching us something. And it's so beautiful because he knows that we're going to go through pain. He knows that we're going to feel like giving up. He knows that we're going to look at him and just say, what, God, why? But he knows at the end of it, we're going to be stronger. We're going to be more confident. We're going to be more of the person that he wants us to be. Right. And it's all about that. It's all about our purpose. And so now, you know, when I face those mountains, I ask that question. I say, God, if this is something you want to take, that's cool. If I have to climb it, I know and I have confidence that you're going to help me climb it. You're going to help us get through. So we know that, you know, my wife and I, we lost a baby, and you know that story. That was a mountain for us. It was like, why, God? Why did you allow this to happen, or why did it happen? Fast forward a year after is when we got the call to adopt Joshua. Yes. And we understood that was a part of his plan in the terms of not just causing that to happen, us losing the baby, but him, you know, making all things new. And I love this verse, Psalm 34:18 says, God is close to the brokenhearted and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. And so when we feel like God is the furthest away, he's at work, man. He's close.
That's where he is.
Yeah, he's close. And he always has a plan. And so Joshua for us, man, being our first son, adopting him, and just how God made all that happen is just an amazing testimony of that mountain. What's on the other side of that mountain? You know? So you have to, life is kind of just like a steady mountain. You'll go through your valleys, you'll go through your high points. There's also views that you don't have when you're in the valley. So that's another detail, you know. You're not going to see all the beautiful things that you can until you get to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
You know?
And if you in expecting to just be picked up and placed on the top of the mountain takes you out of the process.
That's an important point, because we have a culture now that sometimes I think, what I'm trying to, teach my kids right now is grit.
Yeah.
They want to come help me install sometimes, and they're understanding work. I want to teach them hard work at a very early age, because things don't happen, just overnight.
Yep.
You have to work, you have to have grit, and you have to embrace the process. It's all about the process. Sometimes, and most times, it's not about where you get to in life. It's the process and the journey to that place.
Yep.
That's the story.
That
right?
is. Yeah. And if you just were picked up and put on top of the mountain, there is no story.
Yeah.
Right?
And the other thing with that, there's no fulfillment too. So God knows
Zero.
that, so in my life, when I've worked hard for things, now looking back, with our business that has prospered so much, and we're so grateful for our clients and our team and just all the wonderful things that have come out of it. But I really feel fulfilled every morning when I wake up and doing something that I know took grit, and I know took a lot of years of hard work and second guessing, and all those things. It's just a whole different fulfillment.
Yeah. Now, part of that mountain climb with you and your wife, in that journey, in that you wrote a song.
Yeah.
And people, a lot of people don't know this story, but I was doing a class.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
I do remember that.
And I had that song playing, and I didn't know it was your song. I didn't know you wrote that song.
Bro, so from my perspective, I get there that morning. You invited me.
It was at Gasaba, right?
John Maxwell.
Yeah, I was doing a John Maxwell teaching, and it was at Gasaba. Yeah.
And so I walk in. And so the first thing I think of is like, man, did he set this up? Like, this is nice.
Right? Like, that's perfect.
This is weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it just confirmed I was supposed to be, where I was supposed to be.
Tell me about that song, though. The creation of that song. Because it is such a good song.
Thank you. Part of the reason it's, I feel like, it resonated with a lot of people too. Lisa Lopez, the girl that sings it, she's amazing. And we recorded it at Community Bible Church, and with
I have that recording,
400-piece choir. But the song came from that time, that my wife and I were asking the question, why God? And the chorus is, God, you are God, even when I can't see you. God, you are God, even when I can't feel you. And I will worship, I will worship. It's a simple chorus. A buddy of mine was producing an album at the time. His name is Mark Townsend. And he had a beautiful melody, and he had some ideas for the lyrics on the verses. And so we wrote it together. Mm-hmm. He had gone through the same thing as well, losing a baby, and so we just felt it was going to be something that resonated with people. And it's so funny you asked about that song, because the first time I shared that story about Joshua was at Community Bible Church. And I didn't want to share it. It was so vulnerable. It was such a personal thing, right?
Yeah.
To stand in front of, it's about, just over 10,000 people, and just share the story of Joshua, of losing a baby and then adopting, our son, and the moment that I shared it, I remember walking back to my car after that Sunday, and people were coming up and just saying, thank you so much for sharing that story. Thank you. We've gone through that, and we're going through that now. And we were questioning, and that song has really encouraged us. And so I feel like, sharing your story and sharing your wounds and sharing your pain and all those, and being real, is just a beautiful thing in terms of where it will help people.
Yeah.
People know already, man, that we're, there's nobody perfect, man.
Yeah.
Like, we all have scars, and we all have things in our life that we're working through. And I think the more real we can be about those things, man, we're able to connect with people in a way.
Yeah.
And this book, was just like that story, telling that story. Like, it took me years, man, to just say, okay, I'm going to release it, because I go really into the deep moments in my life, man, where they were very, just vulnerable and, personal. But I decided that, man, I need to share this,
It's a powerful story, Josh, man. I listen, every time you're at CBC, I get fired up. Whenever I see that you're going to be singing, I get fired up whenever I see that. Man. And love hearing you do worship at CBC.
Thank you.
And love hearing your music. I mean, you could hear it on Amazon. Like on Amazon Music, I can say, Alexa, play Josh Lopez, and your CD will pop up. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
Of course you knew that. That's hilarious. But listen, I want to thank you for being on TM3 Impact, my friend.
You,
I appreciate this book. And I just want to say, look, please, I mean, at the end of the day, this doesn't make a ton of money, but what it's going to do, I think the bigger picture to this, Josh, I think whatever mess you think you're in, because there's another quote you said God sees the mess and he still sees the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. That's another quote from his book. And wherever you're at, this book will encourage people to really see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And then, you started with your view of like being awake in your dream on the boat. Yeah. Right. And then you go through like, wait a minute, this is what my life was like before. And then you end back on the boat, right? This whole idea, this culminating thing, right? Yeah. And I just sit there and I go, man, I appreciate your heart and I appreciate you sharing that. This will be a massive blessing for a lot of people. But the biggest blessing, Josh, is going to be, the biggest blessing is your kids.
Yeah.
Your kiddos. Tell us to everybody your name. Say hi to your kiddos because they're going to hear this.
So Martha is my beautiful wife. It's the best thing I've ever done in my life, the best of me. And Joshua is our oldest boy. He's amazing. Christian is so amazingly gifted. Man, he's a soccer man. He's 4 or 5 points a game. And then Sophia, 4 years old, man, Sophia Grace, she runs the house.
Of course she does.
We're actually putting a team of my friends together to help us, how do we raise daughters, man, and say no.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. Good luck with that with daughters.
Yeah, I know,
as guys, that's really difficult.
Yep.
That's really difficult.
And so it's a blessing, man. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Tomas, man. We talked about it early on, and man, you're such a positive voice for San Antonio and beyond. And man, blessings to you and your family and just everything you're doing, man. Thank you.
Same to you, my man. Take care. We'll see you soon.